everyone, this is Sleepless Starlight, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be drawing a very modern but not futuristic character. Basically just a character that's set in the current time period we're in right now. Unless you're watching from the future, or the past somehow. In that case, hi! Anyway, so I'm starting off with what I like to call the building blocks phase of a drawing. There's Stickman phase, the building blocks phase, line art, coloring, then rendering. Although, to be honest, my Stickman phase and building blocks phase tends to kind of morph together. But anyway, this is basically just when I figure out what pose I want my character to be having, and that's about it. Anyway, now I'm moving on to the clothes, and I wanted this character to have a very modern-esque clothing style, and I thought it would be really cool to have a crop top with some shorts on and a half-sleeveless sweater on. The problem is, I didn't really understand how the heck I was supposed to get the sleeveless sweater to sweater the way I wanted it to. So I decided I would figure that out later and moved on to adding a cute little beanie because why not? I didn't really feel like there was much else to add at this point, but I thought a cat earring would be really cute, so that's about as much as I did on the rough sketch on paper. I took a little bit of time to take a look at some fashion things in this drawing that were kind of messing me up a little bit, so I took a look at my own beanie because I was struggling to draw that. And I put on one of my own sweaters and slid it off my shoulder so that I could see how that moves and looks in real life. And once I was done with that, I moved on to Clip Studio Paint and redid the entire process. Don't worry, I sped this up really fast though, so it won't really take up too much time. So I just was continuing on trying to overcome art block that I was dealing with, and it was an especially bad case this time. But I find that just drawing and taking maybe a little bit of a break and then getting back into it is the best solution, or at least that's what works for me. So I got to the line art, and this part of the drawing was probably the hardest to me because I felt like something was off with this image, and I could not figure it out for the life of me. It took me like 70% of the drawing to actually figure out what was actually kind of off and fix it later when I was about 70% done with it, so that was fun to deal with. Anyway, I'm going over the hair now, and I feel like I have a bad case of same face syndrome lately, and all my faces and hairstyles especially look the same, so I'm trying to spice things up a bit and make things a little bit different. Granted, that's easier said than done, but just watching some anime will probably help. Anyway, I drew the ear and just was struggling with that for some reason. And then I went on to the beanie. My art style is fairly simplified compared to a usual anime art style. It's some mix between chibi, cartoony, and anime, I've found. So it's kind of simple-ish, but not unheavily detailed. Like, I try to add a lot of details and just like a heavy amount of accessories. And sometimes I try to have things a little bit more minimalistic, like this one. I saw this character as someone who's probably very laid back and relaxed, so I wanted her pose to accommodate that. So I gave her crossed arms, and because I figured that would make her seem a bit more chill and calm. And I made her shoulders slanted, because when you're nervous, you kind of tend to hunch over and like raise your shoulders up, but when you're really calm and relaxed, your shoulders are very mellow and like flat, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm just trying to get everything very precise and specific, and just getting the shoes down. I wanted one of her socks to be scrunched up a little bit and a little bit lower, and then the other one is just a little bit higher and just more straight. So I just gave her sneakers because I feel like I've been giving a lot of characters heels lately. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I don't want to get myself stuck in feeling like I can only draw heels good. I want to be able to draw sneakers and sandals and all the kinds of shoes that I want. And of course, I can add heels as well. I just feel like I should, I try to challenge myself a little bit and do stuff that I feel like I haven't done in a while. This way, I can have a very colorful palette in what I'm able to draw. So then I'm not stuck with just only being able to draw heels or only being able to draw sweaters or something like that. So at this point, I know something is up with this drawing and something just isn't clicking the way I want it to. I couldn't figure out what though, so I was adjusting the hair, I was messing with the liquify tool, which was freaking out for some reason, and I was trying to adjust the beanie instead of actually just redrawing it like a normal person and saving myself like 7 minutes of fiddling with stuff and trying to figure out what was going on. So I went off camera to figure out what was going on with my thing, and then I fixed it, and then everything was able to kind of work the way I wanted it to. I ended up just erasing the beanie like a normal person in a so that's more convenient. So now that that was dealt with, I felt like I could just finish off with the kitty earrings and erasing a few things that were overlapping, and then I was almost ready to start coloring in the drawing. Now what am I thinking? Yep, I am just creating a new folder so that I can start coloring things in. Personally, I love doing voiceovers of coloring especially, and drawing colors too, because when I'm coloring in particular, all the voices in my head of trying to figure out how I want everything to look right just kind of quiets down, and I'm able to just pick colors and just kind of color them in. And as someone who has anxiety, just having my brain be quiet and just not be freaking out all the time is really nice and just peaceful. So that's kind of why I like drawing so much. Anyway, I was continuing on with her color palette and decided to make things a little bit more muted. Um, I wanted her to have a very muted color palette and a cold and have lots of cold colors too, with a little bit of warm colors to add a little bit of accent. So I'm coloring in her sweater, and now that all the line art is done, coloring feels like just the easiest part because I'm just filling in the shapes basically. So I have her coat, sweater thing hanging very loosely, and now I am moving on to the hair after I figured out why the line art was invisible for a second. I clicked the invisibility thing, so that's fun. I saw one girl on Pinterest who had this really dark hair color with like rainbow highlights, and I loved that, and I decided that I have to recreate that in my own way. So I decided to give her a silvery hair color and lots of rainbowy accents to it. And this part in particular, I decided I need to darken up this hair color a little bit because the bright color just wouldn't really make things as vibrant as I want them to be. For this very muted color palette, I want those rainbow accents in her hair to just really pop and seem like they just like a perfect accent piece. So I darkened up the hair color a bit and moved on. I felt like something was off about this picture, and it was really getting on my nerves, so I consulted my mother, who's a full-time artist, and asked if she had any advice or could notice anything that seemed off, and she recommended to flip my canvas, and then I realized that the head was just completely wonky, so I erased a half of it and then just redrew over it and just colored in that gap. And that fixed the problem, and it actually looked the way I wanted it to. Yay! It's finally fixed! I also adjusted her face because I felt like the mouth and nose were a little bit too low and it should be higher up. So now I go on to the fun part, adding in the color streaks. For this part, I get to just go wild with random colors and just streak them in however I want. So I'm just adding things together and just seeing how I want things to be. I wanted this to be like a 45-55 ratio here for the hair. Once the hair was done, I moved on to coloring in the bow and other things that I wanted to be a little bit more vibrant than everything else as an accent piece. So I was coloring in the bow and the crop top with a more slimy neon green compared to everything else. This color still was a little bit muted, but it was a little bit brighter than all the other colors I had been using, apart from those rainbowy hair accents. Because even if I want to make things a little bit less bright than I usually do, I still want to add just a little bit of brightness so that everything kind of, doesn't appear dark and depressing. So I was just coloring the pants very carefully with a bit of a darker color, and then I moved on to the socks. I unintentionally made the socks in particular more colorful compared to everything else, but I felt like everything was just a little bit too muted to me. I don't know. I'm used to more colorful and bright things, and of course I like to change up when I'm drawing every once in a while to keep things fresh. But sometimes it's best to add just a little bit of what you're comfortable with, so that you don't step too far out of your comfort zone. Just take a dip in the water before you plunge into the deep end, if that makes sense. So I am now moving on to coloring in the shoes. And again, the shoes are a bit more of a warm color, but I think it was a really nice accent piece, and I was struggling to figure out if I should give her green or pink shoes, but in the end I gave her pink shoes. Now I am just working on what is usually one of the third to last steps, which is just coloring in the skin. Coloring in the skin of the hands in particular can be a little bit tricky, especially for this drawing, because you don't want to overlap into just the background, because then that's just a bit of a hassle. I colored in the white of the shoes very carefully, and then I colored in the cat earrings. I gave this kitty a little bit of a gray color and colored in the back of that button for her beanie, and then I moved on to the eyes. I wanted for her eyes to also have very cold colors to match with everything else, so I gave her some bluish teal green eyes because I felt like that would correlate well with everything else. Oh my goodness. So I just added a little bit of shading there and moved on to recoloring in all the lines. This just makes everything appear much more softer and more gentle, in my opinion. For example, if you just have plain black lines, things can appear a little bit more bold, but when you have things kind of match with your colors, they can tend to be a little bit more just soft and appear a bit more good. Well, not good. There's nothing wrong with either of them. So I am coloring in the hair, and I thought that I should have random streaks of it be very vibrant to match with the rest of it. And I spent like 3 or 4 minutes just carefully going through all of this. And whoops, my headphones just fell off. Okay, I was just coloring in everything very nice and carefully, and then continued on to the yellow. I was trying to go for like the same colors that I used for those colorful hair accent thingies. I don't know what I'm calling them now. Moving on. Now I'm working on the clothes and just, trying to make things as nice and soft as I possibly can because, I don't know, I think it just looks nice and works well with my current art style. So I am just, going over everything very carefully, trying to make the pants not seem almost invisible because, I don't know, the color I was using for the sweater and crop top didn't really work for the pants, so I had to darken things a little bit to make things feel a bit more visible and not just invisible, if that makes sense. I then colored in the eyes and had to experiment a little bit before I got things right. Then I just experimented a little bit with the gradient tool and discovered a rainbow tool. And as a joke, I decided to see how that would look with the hair, and I accidentally made it perfect as I wanted it to appear, so I guess those 4 or 3 minutes of carefully coloring in every little strand was for nothing, but oh well. As long as it turns out good, I'm not complaining. So I just continued on with the eyes and added a little bit of a gradient because I think that's just fun. And then I was just about ready to move on to the rendering. To me, rendering is one of the most interesting parts of my art process because it's so short and yet it makes such a big difference. You can choose how dramatic you want the lighting to be or how soft you want it to be and decide where you want the light to be coming from, where you want it to be darker, and just it's really interesting to figure out how you want everything to look. So I just was making one half of her a little bit brighter and then another half darker. Then I spent a quick minute just figuring out where I want my watermark to go, and I just was being really indecisive, but once I had it down, then I was about done. So here is the finished product. This character seems like she would be really cool to go to an arcade with after work or school, and personally I'd love to hang out with her because she seems like she'd be a really cool person. Thank you so much for coming along with me as I drew this character, and if you have any ideas for her name, please let me know down in the comments. That's all for today, so I'll see you again later.